In an ever-evolving digital landscape, for your business to thrive, you must adapt or die. Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the podcast helping you harness the power of AI and marketing tools to revitalize and grow your business. And now here's your host, marketing expert and author of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI, Emanuel Rose.
Welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Age of AI. Today, we're going to dig deep into the psychology of Gen Z and understand a little bit about how they're leveraging AI in positive ways and in not so positive ways in their education, and what that may mean when they enter the workforce. And then also we'll get a little speculation about what's unique about Gen Z on the educational front, and how they're different and similar to the Millennials and Gen X. And my guest today to be talking about this is Professor John Aubert, who is a geography professor at American River College and a very experienced educator, both in community college and in outdoor pursuits. So welcome, Professor Aubert.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
I appreciate your time and I appreciate your insights in the advent of Chat GPT. It obviously has taken the business world by storm, has marketing in particular. We've been inundated by tools that are leveraging Chat GPT, and we're seeing more and more marketing that's what we call spray and pray, and what I would call terrible marketing because it's not focused and it's I would say a poor use of the technology. And I wanted to get your impressions about how the adoption rate is with the college students, and B, how your experience of how an educational facility is establishing rules and responsibilities.
Yeah. So it's the Wild West. It is completely the Wild West. And let me say, in my position, and just as a consumer of digital information, I think that AI tools are very promising, and I don't have any problem with them per se. In the academic arena is where I personally have some concerns. I can only speak about it, with regard to my own students and my own situation. I certainly
Sure.
have colleagues who are super excited about it, but it really depends on specifically what the intent is, what students are trying to use it for, what I am assigning in terms of assignments. And so that's sort of my caveat. And how is the institution addressing faculty concerns? Not well, but again, that's my own institution, and I don't think that there are great tools currently for that. So let me kind of back up and give a sense of what um, how my students might try and want to use it. Now, if they simply need some information to then complete a task, so let's say they input a prompt just in the form of a question. Um, uh, what is the technical shape of the Earth? And they need to know that, um, to move on with this assignment. Well, I don't care that, I'm fine that Google or Chat GPT might spit out an answer that gives them some facts and information. That's generative AI, and I'm
Right.
fine if they are simply using that to edify themselves. It's great. It's kind of an easier way to use the internet as opposed to combing through all of the sources that a Google search might spit out. Okay, so I understand that. Um, my concern, and often when any assignment is given in an academic setting, especially for introductory level students, for instance, I don't know, let's say I don't assign term papers necessarily, but that's a common assignment.
Right.
The the product of the term paper is not really the value in having that students do a term paper. It is what they learned in the process of
Okay.
combing through all of that information and distilling it into an answer to a question or a summary of a set of concepts. And if a student tries to largely use generative AI to take whatever the product is that is spit out and then offer it as their own, I mean, that calls into question. That's clearly an ethical question. If you have explained um, uh, what um, uh, um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? If you've explained plagiarism to students, then that's clearly plagiarism, offering up information from another source and attributing it as your own, or
Yep.
not citing it, which is implied that it's your own. So students, when for instance, I have a number of assignments that um, require them to comb through some very specific sources that I provide. So Chat GPT doesn't necessarily limit itself to specific sources, although I'm sure that's coming. But
Oh yeah. Well, you can attach files, for instance,
okay,
or
yeah,
designate
uh, websites.
URLs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, and that just shows you, how um, I assumed that was fairly possible, easy. I don't know if you can attach a URL to a podcast and have it comb through the audio.
Absolutely.
That's clearly going to be easy enough soon.
Yep.
Um, so students, then I ask a question. I say, using only the um, sources provided, because I want to give them a limited pool of information targeted toward the concepts and the topics that I'm interested in. Um, Answer these questions. And so one of the common things is they will put this prompt, they will put this question into Chat GPT or some other service, and it'll spit out an answer, and they'll just plaster it into the space for the answer. A, they have learned nothing.
For
B,
sure.
they have not. It is sometimes obvious to me because Chat GPT's answer is now combed from the world of information. They haven't limited that. So, but even, let's say, when they do learn to limit it to the podcasts and the videos and the websites that I have limited them to, they will still have learned nothing through the process of having to analyze, to summarize, to paragraph, to compare and contrast. All of those things are things that they haven't done. Now, if they actually bothered to read what was spit out, might they have learned something through reading that generative product? I
Yeah.
guess. Um, so that is the biggest hurdle for me. Now, what is the institution doing? Because I am clearly not alone. I talk about this with colleagues all the time. Um, our institution currently has not adopted any software. I know that there are, committees getting together to identify committees, to put the committee together to decide on what service they might choose. But I've read a lot about this already. I've talked to a lot of people about the difficulty of choosing a service, and nothing is foolproof. It can tell you this may have been generated by some form of AI. Um, I personally am loath to accuse a student straight out, because some students might in fact have pretty good writing skills. Generally, I would say that Chat GPT writes better than a lot of my students. Its vocabulary is expanded beyond what a lot of my students have. So I'm reading something and I'm going, "Holy crap! This really doesn't seem like something." But again, it may be very unfair of me to make assumptions about my students, and I get that, but nonetheless, I have an eye that says this seems highly suspect.
Yeah.
So, um, I mean, really scratches the surface. And again, so as to whether or not my institution can help me identify things turned in digitally through some sort of analysis product. Um, we don't do anything currently at my college or in my district. It serves almost 80,000 students. And B, I have heard really nothing definitive by people who use such products in terms of its efficacy.
Yeah. From your impression, what would you say kind of is the percentage or ratio of what you would say is just suspect to
Yeah,
you as an experienced
yeah.
educator?
Certainly, younger students fresh out of high school seem to be much more likely
Is
to
that
use it, to attempt to use it.
50%, 20%?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Maybe 30 to 40.
Uh,
Um, yeah, and and I will say, I try to, and one of the things that the college supports us with is ideas on how to design assignments that are, let's not say AI proof, but that are less likely to have students use AI.
right.
So anyway, to answer your question, yeah, maybe 30 to 40%. It goes down, I think, as students get older. Millennial, Gen Xers, community colleges are known for having a range of students. So yeah, the early adopters, the quick adopters are my younger students, my Gen Z students. Um, but in terms of designing an assignment, so when I teach online classes, a very common assignment is here is some material, here's my recorded lectures, here's a series of activities. Now I'm going to ask you to write a discussion post. And it's a very long prompt. So it's actually a fairly difficult prompt to put into any sort of machine.
Yeah.
Um, but it essentially says, I want you to personalize your answer by integrating not only examples and concepts from the sources I asked you to use, which are often like my own lectures on YouTube,
Right.
where I'm dancing around, I'm showing maps, like maps in the background. But also, since, in geography, oftentimes it's about the real world. Students live in the real world. Students read about the real world. Students travel around the real world. So tell me about a time when you experienced, let's say, some sort of weather phenomena in my Earth system science class. Everybody's experienced weather or can relate that to themselves.
Sure.
So it is painfully obvious when Chat GPT pumps out something that is really quite generic when I am asking students to tell me about places they've traveled and things they've done and things they've personally seen. And it is very specific about um, asking for a personalized answer in the first person.
Right.
Um, and so, but does that stop students from saying, okay, well, let's see, he wants to know about a certain kind of clouds. So I'm just gonna, what I'm assuming, I'm just gonna pop into Chat GPT a few cloud types, and then what does it spit out? It spits out a summary of what those cloud types are, the conditions under which they form, which is nothing like what I originally asked, but the student is kind of grasping for
Yeah.
straws. So
Yeah.
so there is not necessarily any way to foolproof an assignment, but I want them to think, I want them to analyze, and that is the weakness of using AI in an academic context, especially
That's
generative
interesting.
AI.
I'm thinking that we're going to go back to a time like when Socrates would teach on the steps of the Parthenon, and you'll do oral exams with everybody in order to see how well they can think through things.
I gotta tell you, I had that thought has not escaped me, and the logistics and amount of time that it would take to connect one on one. But
Yeah.
that is ultimately that is one, some form of that in a limited fashion is one way to approach that. Is make students, make an assessment which is live and in person, and where students have to pony up and talk about or write about right in front of you a concept. And I
Yeah.
don't want it to have to be that way. Um, there's also proctoring of exams. Proctoring software is really a nightmare. It's
Yeah.
invasive. Some people would say that there's a question of privacy in regards to proctoring software. So I know we're getting off topic, but
Yeah.
but the types of assessments, whether it be an assessment, a homework assignment or something, or literally an exam, it's um, if I ask an essay question in the context of an online exam and I don't have proctoring, there's nothing that says a student can't um, feed that into Chat GPT and just simply give me that answer. Again, it goes back to me. I can tell whether the answer has been gleaned from the wilds of the internet, or if it's been gleaned from the way I personally presented the material in the
Yeah.
context of my class.
Well, it's an interesting challenge that you have, because here we have this giant marketplace drift that's happening with these LLMs and the GBTs, and we want our college students to adopt and understand how to use this technology and this
Of
tool,
course.
right? But then we have to help guide them into how to use it appropriately and how to not fundamentally be plagiarizing something, which is one of the standards of education that is time immemorial,
Right,
right?
right, right. And that's that's the whole other side of this coin, which I'm sure you've talked about in other contexts, is the attribution.
Yep.
Um, if I ask a student, go find this information, and they provide it to me, and they said Chat GBT gave it to me, well, then then, and if I haven't stipulated other things, then I have to accept, well, you attributed it at least to the initial mechanism.
Right.
But what does Chat GPT do? Do they give credit to where they glean information from? No.
And they have
um,
hallucinations. They make stuff up too, right?
Right, right. So there's accuracy, there's attribution,
Yeah.
there's issues of intellectual property that
Yeah.
that come into play there. And then is the product peer reviewed? Clearly, it's not. Now, maybe they've gleaned, if you limit what their source material is to peer reviewed source material, then is the product peer reviewed? I think that's a stretch.
Yeah.
But that's also a concern. It's a little bit less, of a concern to me if students are just doing an assignment where I ask them a series of questions, and the answers need to be, several sentences. I'm not necessarily asking for super strict citations and a bibliography,
Yeah.
but if in fact I'm getting material that somebody else was originally paid to produce, and or is behind a paywall, or is part of their own intellectual property, and it's being given to me, uh, not attributed, and it's being essentially stolen by Chat GPT or any other service.
Yep.
That's another can of worms.
Well, there's two things that are interesting. One is there's a service called Perplexity, which is very good about putting in footnotes and saying where they got the information from. So, to me, that would be like if I was in college right now. That's where I would base my work, and then that way I at least had some references.
Right, right, right. And the potential, I mean, that would then allow a student, um, to go back to the original source material and look
Yes.
at it more deeply if the context and the situation called for that.
Yeah.
So that is promising. I suppose that's also, um, I mean, it's potentially another devious way to ask, the internet, to ask AI to do an assignment for you, if
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
fact
Yeah.
your assignment is 10-page essay on XYZ with appropriate, footnotes and bibliography and citations.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. And again, the original intent of assignments like that is often not the end product, but
Yeah.
what you learn in the process of digging and combing through information and throwing out information. Um,
Well, we call it critical thinking, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And so I think that's the difference in the education space, right? Is that for us in the professional world, we're looking to produce this outcome where we want that work product to do something to either inform or to create an opportunity to do business. And so it's a different kind of rubric that we have to manage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I totally get that. Like I said, it has promise. Um, Certainly amongst the world of, um, uh, writers and researchers who do this as a profession, it's since time immemorial, there's been a concern of people's jobs being replaced by newer technology.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what's new, but it is a little bit sensitive, more sensitive when we start to talk about, the one's own, again, intellectual property. But if the end product, all you need is let's say some sort of product description, or um, some sort of welcome to my website, or whatever it is,
Yep.
then oftentimes it's a quick way to achieve that goal. I will also say I'm not a professor of writing, of composition, but I am eternally thankful to my composition teachers and professors in my life, because I feel like I'm a fairly good writer, and I feel like I have a pretty good critical eye about what is effective writing and not as effective writing. And this is only going to mean that people in general are worse writers.
Yep.
To be able to wordsmith something, to generate ideas into text in a logical way, that skill will be dumbed down by AI, and that is unfortunate. And I don't I don't know how to. Like I said, I'm not even. I've talked to some of my colleagues who are English professors. They teach composition, and they're battling this as well. But
Sure.
that is where they live, is in trying to help people generate ideas in text in a logical format, that are meaningful, that are easy to understand, all of those things.
Yeah,
And
to
boy,
follow story arcs, to understand, the hero's journey and all
yeah,
those things that we
yeah,
have to.
yeah. So we start to lose that, and that's also worrisome.
Yeah.
And so I don't, you know, I don't know where to go. I know you're not necessarily answering every one of these questions. You're
No,
probably generating often more questions
yeah. I
than
mean,
you're
it's
able
the
to.
Wild West. I'm with you. I mean, I don't even know. What I do know is if I was a university I was leading a university, I would have a ethics and AI course that everybody had to take. That would be number one, right? And then we would also build in the curriculum some assignments that were where you had to use AI and then had to present on it, right? So you got to build a 30-page PowerPoint about what every topic from every class or whatever the thing is.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you have to have an ethics class, and you have to start to integrate it, and then you have to begin. There's two other things. One is the AI checkers are good; they're not perfect, but at least you have a fail safe, a filter. And then there's companies that are creating GPTs from university created documents. So all the research that happens, all the papers that happen from a university become the GPT, and that's the reference material. And so then you start to build these environments of approved content so that you do know that it's peer reviewed and good. And I think at least those four things would be progress. But I know that you're dealing with committees, looking for committees to how to get a committee, and it's going to move at a glacial pace.
at a glacial pace. You got that. Yeah. Yeah. And uh, that's a that's a beautiful proposal. That's an excellent idea. And I would think that at some point we're going to start stumbling in that direction. Some institutions are clearly way ahead of where we are.
Sure.
But I mean, it needs to be purposeful. It needs to be proactive. And at this point, I would say I'm in an environment that is currently reactive.
Yeah. Right.
Um, with people who all, you want to. I mean, even though people are going to have different opinions about it, you want people to kind of be on the same page with what it can do and can't do. Um, but I mean, I went to our person who is in charge of instructional technologies, the point person on my campus, and they were they did not give me a promising answer. They kind of gave me the forming committees to determine committees, and the idea that the products out there, nothing has really proven itself to be perfect. We can't look for perfect. We just have to look for that as one measure of
Yeah,
um,
right. It's part of
uh,
the milieu, right?
right,
Instead of a perfect
right.
answer. Yeah. Ready, fire, aim. That's what you got to tell them. Get out there, get in front of it, get started. I appreciate your time. Thanks for having this chat with me. It's interesting to see how education's dealing with it, and it seems like it is it's a squirrely little activity right now. And
yeah, and only complicated by a huge move toward online instruction
sure.
in the post-pandemic era, which a lot of good came from that. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I know that you'll have your thinking cap on and you'll figure out some ways to make it fair and continue to challenge your students. So
Yeah, yeah. I'll write you a 10-page paper about what I learned, and I'll use Chat GPT.
well, I'm going to use Chat GPT to get the transcript of this conversation, send it to you so you have it.
All right, all right, excellent.
All right, Professor, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, Emanuel. Take care, man.
Okay, cheers.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.